Fortnite is taking consoles and PCs by storm with its cartoony take on the PUBG-style Battle Royale formula. And with release on iOS devices, Epic is now offering players the chance to experience it on the go. Now, whether you play Fortnite or not, there's no denying that what Epic is attempting here on mobile is nothing short of impressive. The basic idea is to bring the full Fortnite experience to your phone without sacrificing too much of its visual identity. And that's what makes this different. We've seen similar things with PUBG Mobile in select markets, but the visuals are reduced to the point where it kinda looks like a different game altogether. Not so with Fortnite Mobile. Well, at least on Apple's most recent phones. Today then, we're going to directly compare the iOS version of Fortnite running on an iPhone X against the Xbox One X version, which makes this our very first X versus X face-off. Of course, if you're not running the latest phone, we also have some footage of the game running on an older iPhone 6s just to see what the experience is like on the minimum supported device. Let's jump in. From the moment you fire up Fortnite on the iPhone X, it's genuinely surprising how much this looks and feels like its bigger brother. The menus are mostly the same, the visuals remain similar, and the map is, well, identical. If you've been away from the console or PC version for a while, you might not even pick up on the differences initially. Most importantly for this video, it supports crossplay, which is precisely how we're able to make this comparison in the first place. Basically, I joined up with, well, myself on Xbox One X and went searching for a quick elimination, so to speak. You see, by eliminating my player on Xbox, it's possible to spectate the game on iPhone, allowing for reasonably synchronized shots like this. And the initial view from the party bus paints a rather positive picture indeed, with a detailed island resting below the player that appears comparably sharp next to the Xbox One. As we begin our descent though, the first thing that starts to stand out here is the variation in lighting and shadows. There are shadows on the iPhone X, but the draw distance is pulled in so much that they only kind of appear near the player. Lighting in general feels pared back and simplified on mobile as well. Still, it does manage to look reasonably comparable. But if we jump over to the iPhone 6s, things aren't quite as rosy. In fact, shadows are completely absent, resulting in a very plain looking world, textures are reduced in quality, foliage is missing, and scene complexity appears reduced. While we don't have matching footage of the two versions, the jump in quality is so noticeable here that simply flipping between each version is enough to appreciate the difference. Back over on the iPhone X then, once we're handed control, one of the main benefits of this version becomes apparent: the field of view. Thanks to its wider aspect ratio, the iPhone X version enjoys an even wider FOV than on Xbox One X, allowing you to see more of the action at any point. This also means that your thumb is less likely to intrude on the play area since it's relegated to the sides of the phone. And if you're feeling extra crazy, you can buy one of those HDMI adapters for your iPhone and output it to a monitor. And if you're using an ultra-wide monitor like this, the image will nearly fill the screen. In its current form, this isn't exactly a great way to play, mind you, but if they do add controller support, it might be viable and it should give you a small advantage over other mobile players. Okay, back to the comparisons. Now, running around on the ground, the differences start to become clear rather quickly. Unlike the 6s, foliage is drawn on the iPhone X, but it's reduced in quality and density. On consoles, the grass blows gently in the breeze, while a nice specular effect is applied during certain situations. All of this is absent on the iPhone, but on a smaller screen, it still feels dense enough that it works reasonably well. Of course, when you combine the complete lack of foliage with really poor texture filtering on the 6s, it starts to feel like a more significant cutback. Of course, even on the iPhone X, the lack of grass animation does become rather evident when you move outside of the storm wall. In fact, the whole effect of standing outside of the play area is kind of reduced in terms of visual quality on mobile. There's still rain, but it's missing a lot of the lighting and effects that makes this look so striking on the consoles. If we jump back inside the eye of the storm though, the sky is also rendered rather differently on mobile with a reduction in lighting quality. The haze and sun shafts are also missing on the mobile version, something that becomes extremely obvious in darker conditions throughout the game. Ambient occlusion is also missing as well across all mobile versions, And those individual point lights that are featured prominently in the other versions of the game, yeah, they're gone too. Now, the reduction in AO isn't too bad when you're outside, but while you're exploring all the various interiors of the game, it does stand out. Though, of course, the complete lack of shadows and reduced lighting on the iPhone 6s make interiors look even worse. Also worth noting that the resolution of shadow maps is higher on Xbox One X compared to the phone versions. World shadow maps are also updated at a different rate. They're constantly changing on Xbox One according to the Sun, but on iOS, the position only updates every 5 seconds or so. Now, if we make our way over to the lake, one of the most noticeable differences here is the lack of screen space reflections across water surfaces. On the Xbox, you can see the surrounding areas sort of reflected in the water, and it looks really nice, but on iPhone 10 and iPhone 6s, this is missing entirely, so it looks rather bland in comparison. Really, when you take all of these various sacrifices, they do kind of add up, but then you remember this is all running on a phone. You see, despite all of these changes, much of its visual identity has been maintained. Wandering through the various towns and buildings reveals slight changes to geometry, but the overall effect is remarkably close. The animation is there, the density of objects is there, and the game world is presented just as it is on console and PC. It really is the full experience in that sense. This is certainly much less true on older phones like the 6S though, where the sacrifices are a lot greater. It's the same basic game, but it really winds up feeling kind of old. Like one of those cross-gen titles that launched on both PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 3. It makes sense to support as many phones as possible, of course, but it's clear that targeting lower-end specs has a tremendous impact on overall visual quality. It doesn't stop with the assets either. The resolution is also something I want to talk about briefly. On the iPhone 10, the game appears to run with a resolution scale of around 60% of the phone's screen. This means it's roughly 1461 by 665 or so. A pixel count not that far up from 720p in terms of actual pixels rendered. On the 6S, however, we noted 70% scaling with a resolution of around 934 by 525. Again, it's difficult to get an exact number here due to the oddball resolutions used on the iPhone screens, but again, it is a noticeable drop off from what we see on the 10. Then there's performance. It's always tricky to examine mobile performance as these general purpose devices can exhibit dips due to factors beyond the game's control. In this case, however, Fortnite manages to turn in a surprisingly smooth and stable frame rate. It's capped at 30 frames per second, of course, unlike the 60 FPS Xbox One X version, but it hits and maintains this level most of the time. Now, there are frame pacing hiccups from time to time, sure, but it's not common enough of an occurrence to ruin the fluidity of the experience. For a large-scale open-world shooter like this, it's rather impressive to see just how stable the game is on the iPhone 10. And as a reminder, this is how PUBG Mobile runs on the rather powerful Razer phone. Unlike Fortnite, there are a number of settings you can tweak to improve performance, but even when you're hitting 30 frames per second, there are loads of frame pacing issues present on the frame time graph there, and the game just really never feels very smooth at all. The leap between this to Fortnite on iOS is pretty significant, which I guess kind of mirrors the performance between the bigger brother versions of each of these games as well. The iPhone 6s predictably doesn't offer quite the same level of fluidity. Now again, it's important to note that network quality or other phone functions might have an impact here, but this does seem to be the kind of experience you can expect on this device. There's plenty of small, frequent stutters that impact fluidity, resulting in a less stable frame rate overall. It's certainly not unplayable, but the somewhat basic visuals combined with this lower level of performance make for a lesser experience all around, that much is for certain. Not that it should be a huge surprise that it runs a lot faster on the newer phones, of course, but it is an interesting contrast. In fact, on the iPhone 10, the frame rate is stable enough that I have to wonder how it would run with the frame rate cap disabled. I'd imagine that capping the frame rate at 30 FPS is useful when it comes to conserving battery life after all. Which is an important thing to mention. You see, Fortnite predictably drains your battery rather quickly. On the iPhone 10, I went from a full charge to 25% battery life in just 90 minutes of play. Which means if you rely on your phone for other activities beyond gaming, and who doesn't really, and you don't have a portable battery pack with you, this is a real issue to consider. Of course, Eurogamer's own Christian Donlin suggested that perhaps the target here is battery life long enough to last the duration of a bus ride home from school. This is likely to be a very popular game with kids after all. And that makes a lot of sense, since they are also more likely to put up with the other major limiting factor here: touchscreen controls. The fact is, playing a complex shooter on a touchscreen just doesn't work very well. Epic has done a fine job adapting the game to mobile, of course, and it plays about as well as you could expect, but jumping between the gamepad or mouse and keyboard and a touchscreen only serves to highlight how much worse the game plays in its mobile form. The solution for those of us that don't enjoy touchscreen gaming but want to play on the go then would be gamepad support, which Epic has suggested may be implemented at a later date. If you step back and look at the big picture though, Fortnite on mobile is an interesting game to think about. It makes a strong case for the flexibility of Unreal Engine 4, for instance. That this game can coexist across so many disparate platforms without sacrificing its visual identity is impressive. Whether you're on PC, mobile, or console, this is the same game fundamentally on each of them. This certainly suggests that a port to, say, the Nintendo Switch is certainly within the realm of possibility, and what a smart move that would be. It's also an excellent showcase of cross-platform play. While mobile players might struggle to compete, it's crazy to know that players on consoles, PCs, and mobile phones can all join in the same match, and it really works pretty well. In fact, those spectator shots I've been using throughout the video were made while the phone was connected to an LTE network. Lastly, Fortnite works as an interesting demonstration of hardware evolution in the mobile space. The iPhone 6s was released just 2.5 years ago, which isn't a lot of time in the gaming world, yet the two iterations of the game feel like a generation apart. So what's the verdict here then? Well, clearly, as we've seen throughout this video, a lot of sacrifices were made to bring Fortnite to iOS. Shadows, textures, shading, and effects are all pared back to fit within the confines of the portable platform, yet despite all this, Epic has managed to deliver what Richard might describe as the full fat experience. And I can't disagree. Mobile phone touchscreen driven shooters may not appeal to everyone, but this might be the first time we've seen such a popular game appear so quickly and completely in mobile form. So while I admit that I'm not a huge fan of Fortnite myself, I have to tip my hat to Epic on this one. This is a job well done. It's one of the most impressive mobile conversions I've ever seen. Well done, Epic. That's all for this video though. If you did enjoy it, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us over on Twitter. And until next time, this is John signing off to go play some Instajib Low Grav Unreal Tournament.